Oftentimes I have people approach me and they say, okay, so I've had an experience with a financial advisor or multiple financial advisors in the past. Why you? What makes you different? Those are very honest, real, and appropriate questions. Because oftentimes what I've found is that it wasn't that the previous advisor did a bad job. They didn't. But they didn't understand the person that was across the table from them. They didn't understand. They certainly want you to understand your business as an investment advisor. They certainly want you to understand markets and understand regulations and what can and can't be done and what sort of risk factors there are. But when we talk about people's money, there are a few things that are very, very close to them. They're very, very close to their family. They're very, very close typically to their religion. They're very, very close to their money. The one thing that they're least likely to talk about is their money. So if we have that conversation, it's okay, so what is it we want this money to do for you? We find ourselves in a position where actually they look like they've just seen the light, if you will, and somebody actually asks questions, so where do you want to go? And what do you want to do with your generational wealth if you have that? How does that help you? So who's impacted? How are they impacted? And what does it do for them? What does it do for you as the individual or you as a couple as you look down generational transfers? How do you plan for that in the future? And what does that mean? And I think there are a lot of tremendous people in this business. And I've been a client before. I've not always just been an investment advisor. I've owned businesses. I've worked for a Fortune 500 company. I've worked with a number of advisors on the client side of the table. And I can tell you the ones that were good were few and far between, only from how I defined it, that they actually knew me as a person and knew what I wanted to accomplish and understood, like, this is Mike and this is Mike's wife. And we've been married for now going on 41 years. And these are Mike's 3 boys. And these are now the 3 boys' wives and now the grandchildren. And these are his cousins. And this is his business and in the past, multiple businesses. And how does that all work? And how do we effectively and efficiently transfer those assets at some point in time in the future? And how do we involve the family in that conversation? Now, obviously, there are a lot of things that are going to happen between now and then. As we think through and get to know people better, what oftentimes happens is, gosh, my dad was really good at money, or my mom was really good at money, and the spouse may be saying, well, I had none of that. And that's not uncommon, because oftentimes, couples, when you say opposites attract, that's in so many levels. What I find interesting, once you begin the basis of the relationship as a relationship, not as a transactional environment, but it's a relationship where we get to know one another. Here's what happens. We understand, well, why was dad bad at money? Why was mom bad at money? Why are we concerned? What is the concern? And so soon you find out that perhaps, well, there's some longevity issues. In other words, a person in their family died very early of whatever disease or whatever ailment, affliction, etc., and that concerns them. And so how do we make changes relative to their financial plan? What do we do differently in terms of insurance? What do we do differently in terms of a trust or a family trust if it's necessary? And bring in the right professionals to be able to set up those types of arrangements so that people can rest more comfortably knowing that, okay, so if I follow the path that my brother followed, my family's still taken care of. Or if I follow the path, my grandfather had, he lived to be 98. Okay, well, how do we plan for those retirement years? It's all those things that really play into it that unless you really get to know somebody, it makes it very, very difficult to plan and to have somebody say, these are my plans, not just the advisor's plans. These are my plans, and the advisor listened, and they put them in place, and they make a difference in my life. That's the value of understanding what's behind the statement of I want to accomplish X or I never want to see Y. What is driving this risk aversion or the aggressive nature on the other side of it to be able to say, this is what I need to do? It all depends on one's time frame and perspective, their need to protect assets or their need to go forward. frankly, I have a number of clients I work with where they say, okay, I've done this for a long, long time. You just need to understand this. I've done this for myself, and I'm about as good as what I'm going to get. And they will tell me about how that all worked. And arguably, many people are extremely good, and they spend a lot of time. But here's what happens. They get very myopic in their view, and they understand that the value of professional advice, the value of understanding that somebody understands them well enough to be able to understand what motivates them, so that when we come to make a decision and a recommendation, we can say, this is what we're thinking and why. This makes a difference in your world, and this is how this fits in. This is how, as an advisor, I feel about this and how this fits into your scenario. And then ultimately, what are we doing? So we're thinking, we're feeling, and then we're doing. Logically, that makes sense. We all say, well, I can do that. But as a practical matter, the real value of an advisor, and you can look at all sorts of studies, and they'll tell you it's from X to Y percent. Read those things. We have access to different information or more readily accessible information. But as a practical matter, what really comes down, where the rubber meets the road, is somewhere between the client's ears. We need to make the connection between the left and the right brain, between analytically this works and the right brain, how this emotionally it works, and our primitive brain, which says, is it fight or flight? And how do you take all that and put it into an efficient, effective portfolio, helping them meet their goals, helping them meet not only the goals for themselves or for a couple, but ultimately to efficiently transfer wealth to the next generation, or not. I've had people say, we're spending every dime, they're on their own. And shockingly, I've seen people do that, and their children are just fine because we're working with their children. And their children say, if you help my parents retire like that, you can help me do that. And if it's not you, it's somebody on your team. Therein lies the difference. So what are you thinking? What are you feeling? What are you doing? And then how are you revisiting that? Because people's priorities change over time. A college education turned into a trade school. A trade school turned into a college education and a PhD. A college education turned into we're doing something completely different. And so it's just amazing what we see happen on a regular basis. People change, and the job of the advisor is to understand that change, to understand what's happening behind that change, why it's happening, and then how it's impacting and who it's impacting, and then hopefully to be able to bring a different perspective, a more focused perspective, and oftentimes helping to get to why the emotion, and then being able to get to what are we thinking, what are we feeling, what are we doing. So oftentimes people say, what's the difference? And I believe I've answered that. The follow-up question is, all right, so once we get this established for myself, what do we do for my spouse? How can you help them? Because they have a completely different background, and I'll let you ask them, and I'll introduce you, and you guys work it out. And there's another video I'd like for you to take a look at. It's the next video, and I answered just that question because no two people are the same. So if you found this to be helpful, frankly, you know what to do. Click subscribe. We're not going to spam you. We're not going to pick up the phone and call and email you all the time. But if you have interest in having a conversation, then let's schedule that time. It's important to you. It's important to me. And it's important, frankly, for your family. So you know what to do. We've answered the question oftentimes for the client of what are we thinking, what are we feeling, what are we doing? That oftentimes is met with, right, you've answered that for me, but emotionally, you need to understand my spouse is completely different than me. Opposites attract, and whoa boy, I don't know how you're going to talk with he or she about what's happening in the market, the volatility, and just this emotionally charged, constant, you really can't do something with this attitude. And that's in the next video. I'd encourage you to click on play and join me there.